In June 2025, the world's eyes turned to Kananaskis, a remote corner of the Canadian Rockies, where snow-capped peaks and dense forests formed a dramatic backdrop for one of the most consequential gatherings in recent memory. As the G7 leaders arrived, the air was thick with anticipation and uncertainty, their every move watched by a global audience hungry for answers amid global turmoil. The setting was tranquil, almost serene, but beneath the calm exterior, the stakes were sky-high and the pressure immense. President Donald Trump, now in his second term, arrived with an uncompromising America First agenda, determined to reshape the global order and threatening to upend decades of Western unity with his bold demands. Recent conflict in the Middle East had sent oil prices soaring, fueling economic instability, rattling markets, and sparking anxiety among allies already on edge. The G7, United States, Canada, Britain, France, Germany, Italy, and Japan, faced visible fractures, with old alliances strained and new disagreements surfacing. Trump's looming July 9th deadline, agree to new trade deals or face steep U.S. tariffs, cast a long shadow over the negotiations, raising the stakes for every nation at the table. Canada's new Prime Minister Mark Carney was thrust into the spotlight, tasked not only with hosting but also with resisting American pressure and defending the interests of his allies. The leaders, isolated in the Rockies and far from the world's capitals, were forced to confront their differences head-on, with nowhere to hide from the hard choices ahead. Memories of the chaotic 2018 summit, where Trump withdrew support for the joint statement and left allies reeling, haunted the proceedings and colored every conversation. This time, leaders were determined to avoid a public meltdown, but unity was elusive, and private discussions were fraught with tension and mistrust. The old model of consensus was gone. Deep divisions now defined the alliance, with each nation weighing its own interests against the greater good. Every handshake, every word, and every gesture was scrutinized for signs of weakness, defiance, or the faintest glimmer of compromise. The summit was no longer about shared values. It had become a test of survival for the Western Alliance, a battle to preserve what remained of its unity. Would the G7 hold, or shatter under pressure? The answer would shape the future of global cooperation. The world waited for an answer as the stage was set for a high-stakes diplomatic showdown, with the fate of the Western Alliance hanging in the balance. In Kananaskis, as dawn broke over the mountains, the future of the Western Alliance was more uncertain than ever before. President Trump arrived at the G7 summit with a singular focus: trade. From the moment he stepped onto the world stage, it was clear he intended to shake up the status quo. He demanded new deals on U.S. terms, wielding tariffs as leverage and betting that America's economic might would force allies to cave to pressure. For Trump, every negotiation was a contest, and he was determined to win. The America First doctrine was unmistakable. Trump wasn't seeking consensus or compromise, but outright victory, even if it meant standing alone. The July 9th deadline loomed over the talks, a ticking clock designed to force last-minute concessions and keep everyone on edge. Publicly, Trump projected unwavering confidence. He boasted of quick wins and historic deals. Privately, his team managed expectations, aware that real agreements often take years to finalize. This dual narrative allowed Trump to claim success regardless of the outcome, spinning every result as a victory for his administration. If deals happened, he was the master negotiator. If not, he blamed unreasonable allies and justified new tariffs as necessary protection for American interests. Trump's approach extended beyond trade. On foreign policy, he refused to back G7 calls for de-escalation in the Middle East and openly criticized Russia's continued exclusion from the G8, further straining relations. His willingness to break from the group on both security and trade tested the alliance's limits, leaving other leaders visibly frustrated and uncertain. The message was clear: the U.S. would go its own way, with or without its traditional partners, signaling a new era of American unilateralism. This high-risk strategy left America's allies scrambling to adapt, unsure how to respond to the shifting dynamics and unpredictable tactics. Around the globe, governments and markets watched anxiously, uncertain if Trump's gambit would fracture the G7 for good or simply mark a new chapter in global diplomacy. The summit became a proving ground for the future of American leadership, with the world waiting to see if Trump's bold tactics would pay off. Would Trump's hardball tactics yield real results, or would they deepen the rift with America's closest allies and reshape the global order for years to come? Under immense pressure, as the world watched and expectations mounted, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney chose quiet, principled resistance, refusing to be swayed by intimidation or the loudest voices in the room. Carney, a seasoned negotiator with years of experience, avoided public clashes, instead building alliances with other G7 leaders behind the scenes. His strategy was simple yet effective: unite the group to resist US pressure without direct confrontation, forging a sense of solidarity among the nations. Canada's message was clear and unwavering: no bad deals, no capitulation to threats, and no compromise on core values. Carney used his role as host to control the agenda, emphasizing cooperation but holding firm on trade, ensuring Canada's priorities were always front and center. His calm, strategic approach contrasted sharply with Trump's volatility, highlighting the power of steady leadership in turbulent times. The risk was real. A trade war could devastate Canada's economy, threatening jobs and prosperity across the country. But surrendering would set a dangerous precedent, undermining Canada's sovereignty and future negotiating power. By standing firm, Carney showed that even a middle power could defend its interests with conviction and the support of strong allies. His leadership redefined Canada's role on the world stage, earning respect and admiration from both friends and rivals. In Kananaskis, resolve, not rhetoric, became Canada's greatest asset, setting a new standard for principled leadership in the face of adversity. The G7's fractures were undeniable. Leaders arrived focused on survival, not grand achievements. To avoid a repeat of 2018's chaos, they abandoned the tradition of a joint communiqué. Instead, they issued separate statements on issues where agreement was possible, sidestepping deep divides. This pragmatic shift masked the reality: consensus was gone. European leaders experienced with Trump's tactics presented a united front, refusing to be rushed into one-sided deals. The summit became an exercise in damage control, not ambition. Leaders avoided public criticism, but their actions spoke volumes. The alliance held together, barely, by acknowledging its differences. The G7's new reality: unity through managed discord. Despite Trump's bold promises, the summit ended with no major trade breakthroughs. Hopes for deals with Japan and the EU fizzled. Only a minor agreement with the UK emerged, leaving key disputes unresolved. Trump's tariff threats backfired, hardening allies' resolve instead of forcing concessions. Leaders refused to reward economic coercion, fearing it would invite more demands. The fundamental clash: America first versus multilateralism. The US sought bilateral dominance. Allies defended the rules-based system. The ideological gap was too wide for quick fixes. The summit exposed the incompatibility of Trump's vision with that of America's partners. In the end, the deal that wasn't said it all. With an unpredictable US president, G7 leaders mastered the art of the non-deal. Their goal: prevent a breakdown, not chase breakthroughs. They appeared engaged, offering Trump progress he could tout, while refusing real concessions. Foregoing a joint communiqué, they issued targeted statements, agreeing where possible and isolating the US on contentious issues. Mark Carney fostered G6 solidarity, blocking divide-and-conquer tactics. The Allies' united front was polite but unyielding. By calling Trump's bluff, politely, they deprived him of a narrative of obstruction. The summit became a lesson in collective resilience. The G7 navigated crisis by adapting, not capitulating. In Kananaskis, unity was redefined as strategic resistance. The 2025 G7 summit proved that, despite deep divisions, global cooperation remains essential. Leaders faced crises: Middle East conflict, energy volatility, Ukraine AI, that no nation could solve alone. The very act of gathering in Kananaskis underscored the G7's enduring value as a forum for dialogue. The old model of consensus is gone, replaced by flexible, issue-specific cooperation. This pragmatic approach allows progress where possible, even amid discord. Shared challenges, supply chains, climate, rising powers, demand collaboration. The summit's message: retreat isn't an option. Dialogue, however difficult, is vital. In a fractured world, the G7's imperfect unity still matters. Kananaskis revealed new truths about global leadership. Power now means coalition building and principled resolve, not just economic or military might. Trump's America First approach showed the limits of unilateralism. Allies refused to be bullied. Mark Carney's quiet strength elevated Canada, proving middle powers can lead by example. European and Japanese leaders displayed unity and patience, signaling a shift in alliance dynamics. The G7, minus the US, acted as a cohesive bloc, redefining Western leadership. The summit tested competing models, threats versus resolve, isolation versus cooperation. American influence remains strong, but alliances are now conditional and earned. The lesson: true strength lies in building trust, even with rivals. In the new era, leadership is about persuasion, not just power.